We can't really talk about teaching jazz band or starting one if we don't talk a little bit about the rhythm section at least. Now, a person can talk about the rhythm section of the jazz band for hours, but I just want to give you a couple of basic pieces of information. First of all, the bass parts are usually written pretty well at the beginning and intermediate level. Guitar parts are usually written pretty well. The drum set parts and the piano parts are usually written really poorly, and part of it is that the editor doesn't know your band, but especially in the piano parts, the kids are going to look at it and see a lot of whole notes tied over and half notes tied over. And if they played that, it's going to make your band sound muddy. No piano player in a big band would play that. So your best bet is to start listening to big band piano players. Find somebody in your community who will come in and work with your kids if you can. And if not, if you're really stuck, think of the piano as a rhythm instrument. So their rhythms that they play can either complement with the rest of the band, so they can play in the holes, or they can use some of their piano parts to accent the rhythms that are in the horn parts. One problem with having the piano player play the whole shout section is it can get really muddy, and you can't really hear the piano at that point anyway. So lots of times when there's a big shout section, I'll have my piano player just lay out and use that instrument for the tonal color that it comes with, where you can hear it. Really, with piano, about 25% of what's written on the page is what your big band should play. In my opinion, I think the piano parts are way overwritten. But one thing that you will see sometimes are some decent voicings. Voicings on the piano part are kind of the magic thing. You don't want your students to play all their chords in root position. It'll sound really dorky and it won't swing. Steve Owen put out a piece called Jazz Builder Step 1. And he talks about voicing the piano starting with the root in your pinky and coming down by fourths in the chord. It's really great. In fact, the entire rhythm section um, part of that chart comes with a note for the directors on how to teach the rhythm section, and it covers how to create a walking bass line. It covers how to do the piano voicing. It covers some great stuff on the drum set. So if you are starting a jazz band, I would encourage you to buy Jazz Builder Step 1, and especially read the notes that Steve put in for the director. I use that stuff all the time. Another thing about piano players is as you're building your jazz program, you might not find any kids at your school who play jazz piano. That's okay. Find the kids who play classical piano and help them learn to swing. It'll take a little bit of work. They are used to reading every note off the page and playing it exactly the way it's written. So you may have to encourage them to free up their approach to their music a little bit. Once you get that piano player in your band, I like to teach the piano players the form of the chart first. So the introduction and the head and the bridge and the solo section and all that kind of stuff. Teach them the forms first. Then they usually have a written solo section, so get them to look at their solo section next. Best way to do this is by checking out professional players on that tune. So if you watch some of the old videos of Count Basie and Duke Ellington, you can see how much they play or don't play with their band. Mostly they play between the band when you can hear it. So learning when the piano sits out can really help clean up your sound and give you an opportunity to teach the use of space and balance in the band. Um, I don't use it very much, like I said, in the shout chorus. It can be good for some punch, but not every note on every line. It's too much. And especially with beginning bands, the piano can help them find the pitches in those big cluster chords, or it can really highlight pitch discrepancies if you have everybody playing loud at the same time and have a wide variety of pitch center, and then the piano is playing, it can really make things muddy. I want to talk a little bit with you about starting your jazz drummer. So, you get that kid to sit at the kit and start them off, like I mentioned earlier, with the hi-hat on 2 and 4, and then the spang-a-lang on the ride cymbal. Make sure that they're playing with their thumb on top for the ride cymbal, okay? So not this, but this. And you want to teach them to keep their wrist really flexible and act like they're playing through the cymbal, all the way through. Um, Really, the most important thing for them to learn is not spang-a-lang. The most important thing for them to learn on that ride cymbal are really steady quarter notes. So even if you start them off going tang, 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 on the hi-hat, tang, ching, tang, 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 to get a really good sound, playing quarter notes really steady. That's really going to help your band. A lot of people play, they think they have to go spang, spang, a lang, and they can not only get lost, but it can get cluttered. It's kind of too much wash in the cymbal. And just keep that with the thumb on top, and playing all the way through the cymbal is really going to help them and help your band sound good. There are a couple of different schools of thought on how to use the bass drum in the big band. Um, some teachers teach that when you're starting your jazz drummers, you should go ahead and teach them to put 4 on the floor, because it will reinforce the bass line and teach them later when they need to feather that bass drum. I don't personally start with 4 on the floor. I ask my students not to play the bass drum in the beginning really at all, unless they're doing a fill or setting up the band with a rhythmic figure. I like to save that bass drum for those kind of punches, and we can worry about 4 on the floor and feathering a little bit later. That's going to be kind of your choice. My experience with the younger players is, if I teach them 4 on the floor, it's really hard to get them to stop doing it. So I think most of them have already, especially if they have a drum set at home, they're already playing 4 on the floor all the time. So I spend my time trying to move them away from that rather than reinforce it. Fills and setups make a really big difference for the horn players as far as helping them come in on time, but I don't actually start there either. I try to get my drummers to understand that they have 3 jobs, and surprisingly, keeping time is not one of them. Really, that's everybody's job and can be most easily affected by the bass player. So for drummers, number 1 job, showing the form. We need to know when the next set of 12-bar blues comes. We need to know when there's a new soloist, showing the form. The second job of the drummer is dynamics. We need you to play soft when the band is soft, and we need you to play big when the band is big. And so if the drummer is playing big when the band is soft, of course, it's not very soft. And if the band is playing big and the drummer is playing soft, that also doesn't work. So the drummer needs to lead the band in dynamics. And then the last thing are fills and setups. Fills and setups should be very, very simple to help the band have the confidence to come in and to know when to come in. So it can be as simple as 3 quarter notes. If the band comes in on the end of 3, the drummer can play dang doom go bide up and let that band bounce off of beat 3. It really helps the band if the drummer can set that up well. I want to talk with you a little bit about the bass. Electric bass is really easy to learn. And if you don't have a bass player, you might want to take the best flute player in your band and hand them an electric bass and see if you can get them to play. I find that if you get a few lessons and you can read bass clef, really it's going to help you. It's not hard and it's really fun. It's also a great way if you're just starting off a band and all you have is a drummer. If you're playing bass, that'll really help. You can use keyboard bass. I've had piano players that use keyboard bass. Just try to get a decent keyboard bass setting on the electronic keyboard that you're using. If you're at a school that's lucky enough to have a strings program, finding an acoustic bass player would be great for your band. The thing that's different, of course, about acoustic bass is the attack and the decay. So electric bass tends to have a sound that is really sustained, doom, 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 which is nice, it's good. But if you can get that acoustic bass to go doom, 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 with a little more delay on the sound, you're going to get a more percussive sound, which is going to help your band. So I like acoustic bass. I start my kids on electric bass, and usually between 6th and 7th grade, I will get them to switch over to the acoustic bass, which I think sounds a lot better in the jazz band. If you do have an acoustic bass player, there's a few things you want to help them with as far as their sound, especially if they're playing on an amp with a pickup. So the amp should never be louder than the bass. The sound that you're getting up front should be 51% acoustic and 49% amplifier. So make sure that they don't have that amp turned up so loud that you can't hear the glorious sound of the instrument itself. Also, their left hand, we want that left hand to be in a letter C, and that their thumb should be opposite their middle finger. And when they're playing, the right arm nice and straight and pull across the strings, pull across. You might use 2 fingers to pull across the strings so you're getting that really big bass sound. Don't let them play acoustic bass like this. Okay, they need to play with 2 fingers and pull the whole string, not like this. You can remind them that the amp is there to boost the sound of the bass, not create it. The guitar is a really important part of the big band sound. And you can probably find guitar players at your school. Lots of kids play guitar. But jazz guitar is not the same as country roads. And since I'm not a jazz guitar player, I ask that my kids get jazz guitar lessons to help them. But you can also help them get a good sound by doing a couple of simple things. First of all, make sure they have the right instrument in their hands. Get a semi hollow body guitar. They're not that expensive. There's pretty nice ones out there for about $350. Buy one for your program and let that jazz guitar kid play it. It's going to make a big difference. Then there's the treatment of the amplifier, which is really important for this. I like my students to turn the sound all the way up on the guitar and all the way down on the amp. Okay, maybe not all the way down, maybe to 1 or 2 on the amp. So what they're getting is a lot of signal coming from the instrument to the amp, a lot of signal, but we're not getting a lot of amplified sound because really the part of the guitar in most bands is about percussion. Doom shum, doom shum, doom shum, doom shum. And you can see I'm doing this with my left hand because if you watch Freddie Green, if you watch those guys play, they are lifting and muting between the chords. That's really important. So get your kids to check out YouTube and check out this technique that happens with the left hand. One last thing about your rhythm section. You may find that you have too many players in the rhythm section. You might have, 3 or 4 drummers show up and 2 or 3 bass players show up. And that's a good problem to have. I think you can put extra percussionists on auxiliary percussion. You can put them on vibes, or if you want, you can set up another suspended cymbal and hi-hat in the back of the room and have them doing their spang-a-lang and playing on 2 and 4 at the same time. However, if you have more than one bass player, I only let one bass player plug in at a time because whoever's playing drums needs to be able to look at that bass player. We've got to have eye contact back and forth between the drums and the bass to make sure that they're really locking that in. And I find that young students are shy about looking at each other. They get a little weirded out because they're not used to that kind of communication. But again, if you show them some YouTube videos of the way that bands look at each other, if you show them how rhythm sections can cue each other, I think it'll help them. And plus, it's just more exciting when they can see that the band members are interacting, which is, of course, one of the most fun things that we get to do in the jazz band setting. We don't get to do it as much in the classical setting, but in the jazz band setting, you can really see it on stage, so that's fun. When you're working on having your drummer and your bass player lock up, I tell the bass player they have to pretend that they're playing the ride cymbal with their right hand. Dang, 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 dang. And then you tell the drummer he's got to pretend that they're playing the bass with their ride cymbal. Doom, 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 doom. They have to feel like they are working each other's instruments, and that will help them as far as locking down the time. You can also have your piano player learn how to play vibes if you have extra piano players. I usually take 2, and they both take turns on the vibes and the piano, and they also learn auxiliary percussion, which I think really helps their rhythm. Because one thing I've noticed with a lot of piano players that come to me as 5th or 6th graders is because piano is a solo instrument. Sometimes my pianists have a liberal interpretation of time because they play by themselves most of the time and they don't spend a lot of time with the metronome. So putting them on auxiliary percussion can really help build their sense of internal pulse and give them something to do if it's not their turn to play on that chart. A lot of big band charts, especially at the middle school and easy high school level, are coming out with what I like to call all the flavors. So there'll be a flute part and a clarinet part and probably a French horn part and a tuba part. This is really great, especially if you're starting your jazz program. Get as many kids in as you can. Yes, it won't be the traditional sound. That's true. At our school, I run 2 jazz bands. I have the audition jazz band, which is a traditional instrumentation, although I do take 6 saxophones, 5 trombones, 5 trumpets, and then I like usually 2 on each rhythm section chair because you never know if somebody's going to get sick or have a soccer tournament. And then I have another band that is for any qualified second-year player, and that includes flute, tuba, French horn, doesn't matter. Um, it's worth it to give those kids the opportunity to learn this music. And again, jazz is what you do to the music. So what I like to tell the kids is jazz is a style. Big band is a sound. Just like a string quartet is a sound, you don't have trumpets in the string quartet. But jazz is a style, and everybody can learn that style. In my audition band, I go with traditional big band sound, but in my second band, the Jazz Academy, everybody is welcome. And if you have kids who play flute and they really love that music, you might encourage them to get their hands on a saxophone or a trombone or the electric bass. If they love the music and you have the passion to show them, they can learn a jazz instrument if they want to sit in a traditional sounding ensemble. I like to have my kids sing in band class every day. We sing something. Either it's you're going to sing do while everybody else plays the scale, or you're going to sing your tuning pitch, or I'm going to sing a jazz lick to you and you're going to sing it back. We sing every day, and I think it speeds up the learning process for them, and it can really help with improv anxiety because it's easier to sing a lick for a lot of kids than it is to play that lick. And it can also save their chops if you're rehearsing a lot, working really hard. Get those trumpets to sing that part. And all of a sudden, you may hear whether or not they really understand those rhythms. Another really fun way to do it is to have the kids put their horns down and smack the rhythm of the shout section on their leg. And all of a sudden, you will hear whether or not they understand how that rhythm really works. So there are ways away from the horn that you can help your band sound good. With the beginning jazz band, I will use that Bruce Pearson Standard of Excellence jazz method, and you hear him sing at the beginning of the tune, and he goes da 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 da, and it's so awful. But I tell the kids that he does that deliberately so that they won't be afraid to sing, and it makes it fun for them. And if I tell them you can go ahead and sing it just like Bruce, if you want to sing it weird, it's okay. Gives them the opportunity and the ability to just go ahead and do that and not worry so much about whether or not they're singing it well. I want them to just go ahead and sing it. The last thing I want to say about starting your big band program is don't be afraid to adjust the arrangements to fit your band. If you want to add another chorus so you can feature more soloists, that's great. You can teach the band how to compose their own backgrounds, which is really fun. If you have to, you can cut out a section that's not working as long as you don't wreck the form. If you need to give that tenor sax solo to your lead trombone player or have them play it as a duet, if it sounds good, go ahead and do it. Let the kids see you and hear you make executive decisions about this music. And even better, ask them what they hear. Ask them what they like. It's part of that what if we go ahead and use that as a jumping off point for them. What could you change in your band to make this sound more like Gordon Goodwin? What could you do to make it sound like more like Count Basie? Remember, it's a journey. It's not about arriving, it's about how you got there. At the end of my presentation, I will have a link to all of my writing and links to the books that I like to use in my program, but I will hold up a few right now. So here, great book for starting your kids on improvising. Antonio Garcia, great book. Using key centers, which is a really fun way to learn how to improvise. Chop Monsters. This is a great way to teach kids how to improvise using numbers. And I'm a big fan of using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as a way to talk about scale degrees because that's what they are. I will often use the Essential Elements for Jazz Standards book. It comes in all the flavors. So there's a flute, clarinet, French horn book. This is the rhythm section book. The tunes I've got marked in here are Now's the Time, Blue Bossa, Footprint, St. Thomas, and Autumn Leaves. Great tunes, really nice arrangements, standards. I'm a big fan of teaching standards for the kids because I want them to be able to turn on the radio and hear music that we're working on in class. I want them to be able to get on YouTube and find arrangements and versions that they can listen to and interpret. Here's a great one that came out this year, Improvisation 101 by Greg Yazinitsky, Major, Minor, and Blues. Really great, easy way to teach your kids how to solo. There's also another Essential Elements set called Essential Elements for Blues that I really like. Don't be afraid to buy those books. I think they're a great value. I think they can really help you, especially if you're a new teacher, find your way. They come with recordings. They come with background tracks. And the other thing I just really want to mention is something called iReal Pro. This is like a band in a box, basically. It provides backing tracks for your students on tunes, and they can create their own solo section length. So if you want it to go 5 or 6 or 8 times, you can change the key. You can change the style. You can change the speed. It's great. You can even put your own tune in there with your own chord changes. So iReal Pro. I think the app is $3.99. It's really affordable, and the kids really like it. So that's it from me to you. I hope that your year is going well and that the next time I see you will be in person at Midwest. Thank you to the Midwest Clinic for providing this opportunity for me to share a little bit of what I love, which is teaching band and especially teaching middle school jazz band.